Hello, Teach Jam community. We have a very special guest for y'all today. Of course, before we get started with my guy right here, I am Dr. Travis Brown, your principal's favorite principal, and I have the honor today to discuss a lot of matters, a lot of urban educational matters. My guy right here, the revolutionary educator, you know him as Amen Rahh,
Yeah.
straight from Compton. So we got a lot to get to today. But before we get started, definitely want to shout out our partners at Dean's List. If you don't know about Dean's List, when you talk about school culture, you need that platform to do school culture well. Talk to Dean's List. But so
Yeah.
let's get into it, man.
Man, let's get into it, bro. Let's get
So I
into it.
want to start. I want to first start off. I know we started when we started speaking. I made a statement one time. I said today's schools are not prepared to solve tomorrow's problems.
Right.
So what does that mean to you? Let's kick off with that.
Yeah. What it means to me is that kids are going back to the past when they come to school. Like right now, when we think about society, when we think about the world, I mean, you see it at your school. You got kids building bodies of work here. You got kids building actual products and solving problems. And for many of our kids in urban schools, they're going to be told what to think, and they're going to be, in many cases, in an ecosystem of low expectations, just getting the bare minimum. Can you just learn how to read instead of actually solving and building real products that can make humanity better, but also so for them to thrive once they leave the educational system. I think in order for us to really do some of that work, we have to elevate our skills. So and put the mirror up, like yo, we still got Flintstone practices in a world where Flintstone practices in a world that's filled with the Jetsons. Like society is the Jetsons, but our schools act as the Flintstones. And I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Got you. So you travel the country, and you're putting this calling card out there around schools and not being prepared for the future. How bad actually is the issue? So if you could put a number on it, or you
Ooh.
because you go around the country, how bad is
Listen,
it?
I'm gonna say this: like we are beyond the state of emergency right now. Like we are beyond it, and I say especially for, and I'm gonna specifically say for Black students, this could be our last chance within the last 5 years to truly be in control of changing the trajectory for Black students in America, with automation, with technology, with with our financial system. This is our opportunity. If not, the trajectory and the achievement of Black students will be in the control of someone else. And I think that's the urgency we have to move with. Because if we don't move with that, we will continue to be knocking on somebody else's door saying, "Can we get some? Can we learn like you? Can we?" And that's been the biggest thing. And Dr. Brown, like you said, I travel across the country. I mean, from the most rural area in Kentucky and Ohio to the most affluent area to the poorest schools to the wealthiest schools. And it was funny. I was talking with someone earlier, and I said, the common thread with high performing schools across the country, no matter where they're at, has been the ability for students to exhibit, exhibition, the ability for them to solve two things. One is getting their kids to build something and getting their kids to exhibit something that they built and a problem that they solved. Because when you're building something, you organically or authentically learn. But you can learn something and never build it. Right? You can learn,
Right.
but doesn't mean that you built something. Because the evidence of true learning is through application. So if you go and say, give you context, you may have learned about robotics, but I haven't built anything that is robotic, right? And I don't know, I don't know what robotics use case for when it comes to solving critical problems. I just learned about it. So that's where we need to start really shifting, the language off. I don't want to hear like, yo, this is what our kids learned this year. I want you to answer, this is what my kids are building this year. Or this is what my kids have built this
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, educators out there, it's not about what our kids have learned, right? What are they building? What have they built? What did they create? Do they have a body of work that makes sense not only in the classroom but in the real world? and that's big. Okay, so people are going to say, okay, we hear you, right? But if I'm the average urban educator, whether it's a teacher, administrator, whomever, right? Where do I start? How do I get from the Flintstones to be more futuristic, be the Jetsons? Because what I'm hearing is that it's a big leap, it's a big gap. So, so what are the first steps that I need to do if I want to get there? Like I hear you, now I want to do that. Can you give us some practical first steps? What do these people need to do?
First be tapping into organizations like Teaching. First tapping into resources to understand like, okay, I do have to reflect and realize that there's not really meaning when it comes to education in my school or in my classroom, right? There's a lot of teaching, but not a whole lot of learning and building. So I have to be able to say, you know what? I got to level up in this practice. So tapping into organizations like Teach Jam. But number one, I would say first is going into professional development around how do I get students to build products and build on top of problems to solve it. Like I'll give you a context, right? When we think about Black children and we think about Black wealth in America, let's look at the top 10 African American, the richest African Americans in America, right? I believe 7 out of 10 are entertainment, media, artists, right? And if you look at the top 10 wealthiest just overall, you want to know the common thread? 100% of them have degrees in STEM.
That's funny because I know one of the things that Earn Your Leisure EYL said is like why Black people, people of color, we always look to entertainers to solve our problems, our leaders. But if you look at white America or other groups, the people who are leading the pack that's moving the culture forward are not the entertainers.
And like, and think about this: our biggest, and there's nothing against it, but we just have to call it out. Our biggest thought leaders come from we're writing books, and we're the biggest thought leaders in the world are writing code, right? And think about this: if you look at the even the Warren Buffett's degree in economics, if you look at the degrees in engineering, degrees in mathematics, degrees in commerce, degrees, they're either building products that solve macro problems, or they're investing in those companies that are building products to solve macro problems, right? And for us, it is really important for us to be the curators of the world, especially for Black children, to be problem solvers. Or they feel like, well, y'all just entertainment. Y'all just performing arts, right? Like, I'll be honest with you, bro, we got enough performing arts schools.
Say that again, man.
We got enough performing arts schools. We need to be graduating engineers. We need to be graduating data scientists. We need to be graduating computer scientists. We need to be graduating economists. We need to be graduating those who are in these fields because these fields are increasing when it comes to the control and the wealth transfer that's happening right now.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Now we gave tangible next steps. Tap in, really go to professional development. There's a lot I want to touch on and get your take on it. There's a lot of companies out there. I call them like piranhas, if you will, that are pushing tech solutions, what I call other people's genius on kids. And then we get fooled and say, okay, my kids are coding or my kids are doing STEM because things are flying around the room, but there's already somebody's genius locked in code in there and kids are they manipulate one or two things and we think we're doing STEM. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because as we traverse this field, there's going to be more and more companies, organizations popping up that's kind of, sort of, but not really push our kids. So can you just talk about that for a
Yeah, I
little
want
bit?
to talk about, you said a lot there, and I want to break it down so we in education really know how to move forward, right? One, when we think about STEM and we think about majority, macro level in education, most of the STEM tech solutions piranhas on many Title I schools or schools that serve Black and brown kids.
Yeah, let talk about that, man.
Right?
Yeah, talk about that. Yeah.
Like they focus on Title I. We are the Title I solution.
Right.
We can come and help you with X, Y, and Z. But let's also remember that those founders and those who develop the code don't represent the kids in the community. So it's very difficult for them to develop products that actually hit home for many of our kids. And if we look at it in a financial aspect, These are companies that are not representing our community that are making billions of dollars off of the kids. Let's look at the data. 75% of the demographic in Title I schools are Black and brown kids. Most of the wealth that is positioned for ed tech companies come from Title I schools. Less
Really?
than 2% of ed tech founders are people of color, specifically Black founders. So there's a representation gap that exists in that. But now let's go back to what we need to do to be aware. What we have to do to be aware is like not just playing with these objects and not make them just be toys, right? You say that a lot. And we have to really dive into what is the rubric of excellence when it comes to the pathway or the program that we want to implement in our school. Too many other times as I visit schools, they say, hey, we have this program and it's not connected to anything. It has no real relevance and it's only like 7 kids in it. And then the kids that really need to be in there, they're not being recruited because we go back to focus on chronic absenteeism. We go back to the norm. We go back to our Flintstone practices. Yeah. And we use that as enrichment and we use it for after school. So this would be my suggestion, and this is my call to action, is as you discover new products, I want you to discover a new master schedule. I want you to discover how do you prioritize your time when it comes to implementing STEM programs, and how do you allocate the resources towards representative and culturally responsive STEM programs or culturally responsive technology to address the specific needs for those kids in your school.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So next thing, I want to really talk again to our urban educators, because our principals, as we know, we have a lot of buying power or spending power. We have large budgets, right? And we can really move this thing forward. Can you talk a little bit about, because I see some of the problem is where urban educators are still prioritizing their time, their energy, and a lot is not thinking about the future. So if you could speak to urban educators out there that may be doing some of the Flintstone practices or worrying about whatever buzzword comes up, talk to a little bit about how do we need to start the conversation to really shift their mindset, like around these things.
Yeah, I say this, and I want to speak to every educator out there, like what Malcolm X said, education is the passport to the future, right? And if we're not fully engulfed in education, then we're gonna be stuck in the past. And like segregation of the past creates the wealth gap of the now. And if we are not conscious of that and we are not aware of that, we become complicit in that. And for so long, we have been complicit when it comes to actually widening that achievement gap, right? So I think it's really important for us to really realize a few things. Number one is how do we become more diverse in our practices? And coming in communities with Teach Jam, coming into communities like myself, we're teaching educators how to teach themselves new practices, right? Because you gotta break that. Because if we don't break our current practices and know that we have to elevate, we will continue to go through this cycle. And if we continue to go through this cycle, Dr. Brown, the same inequities that exist now, that exist in the past, is gonna exist 10, 15, 20 years from now. But the major difference is we won't be in control anymore. And that's the biggest thing.
So we've heard that we've heard the opportunity gap, achievement gap. We know the STEM gap persists, especially when we get to higher ed. It sounds like that's leading to a creation gap. Who's creating the future and who's just kind of living in it. So with that, if we don't take heed to the revolutionary educator, and we say, yeah, this is just a fad, he's just talking, AI is cap,
Right.
all those things. Can you paint a picture around what are our young Black and brown kids, our white kids in rural areas? We're talking about a lot of kids that are disadvantaged right now. What do their lives look like in the next 20, 30 years as they come of age to start working in our American system?
Listen, Dr. Claude Anderson said, when white affluent communities get the code, Black urban communities get pneumonia. And what I mean by that is, listen, let's look at the data. Goldman Sachs said close to 300 million jobs will be eliminated by 2030 due to AI and automation. 300 million globally. You're talking about possibly 73 million jobs eliminated by 2030 just in America. Who do you think that's going to impact? What are the new jobs that's going to come up? So when I say this, it's really important for us to understand the jobs that exist now won't exist 3 years, 5 years from now. What employers are looking for right now, they won't look for. They will look for different skill sets coming up. Those who are coding the software with automation and AI don't look like us for the majority. So we are consuming the new world. We're not producing the new world. We are not creating. We're not creators in the new world. So the charge is we must be creators and not just in the arts, right? We must be creators, not just in entertainment. We must be creators, not just in athletics. We must be creators of new software. We must be creators of blending thought leaders to technology to scale solutions. And when I say this too, think about this, Trav. When you think about all the things that's happening with technology, with all the things that's happening in our society, and I want to say this, we need ethical AI. We need thought leaders to think about, what does legislation look like? What does taxes look like? How do we now preserve human connection with the new technology? And it doesn't mean that we wait for somebody else to dictate it. And what it means is we have to learn this tech so we can create legislation and have lawyers and lobby for it. Because if not, we stay as consumers. And we've known, history have taught us what it's like to stay as being consumers. Educators, we can't just consume what, all right, this is what the superintendent said that was going to do. And then you wait, you know it's not going anywhere. The chancellor of the DOE just said, well, hey, we're going to lean into AI now. I've been speaking to you about
banned it first.
They banned it first.
And then it's either like you either roll with us or you get rolled over. It's not stopping.
It's not stopping. I'll tell you this too. So, believe the CEO of Google was speaking, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, you know, I can't stop innovating when it comes to technology because I don't believe Apple, Microsoft, and these other companies will stop innovating. And even if they came together and said that we'll stop, they don't believe that the kid in Nebraska in the garage is going to stop. Nowhere in that conversation are we thinking about us.
Because that kid in Brooklyn, that kid in Compton didn't even start.
Didn't even start. Wasn't even aware. Didn't have access. Didn't have an opportunity. Didn't even know that these problems existed and that technology can help them solve it. So we got to be able to put those tools in front of them, but also learn ourselves so they can be equipped to develop and not just be part of the Google, but be part of building the next or bigger Google, right? And I think that is when we start talking about true dynamic shifts.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? When you think about it, in New York City, Black and brown people have been complaining about getting taxi cabs for the longest. It was even famous actor Danny Glover. He was in New York City one time, couldn't get a cab. So New York City's been infamous for not picking up Black passengers going or Black and brown passengers going to certain places. But we didn't innovate and create an Uber.
And you know what's crazy is that those systems were actually like Black people was invented, like that whole kind of, hey, let's share, ride share. Right?
Yeah.
But it's like, how do we now scale? And I say this too. What's really important.
That is real. That is real.
This is really important.
Especially in places like
Pittsburgh.
and, East Flatbush, you know, like, they got the dollar van, things like that.
This wasn't like some innovative idea.
Right.
It was something that was already started, but that layer of resource and access didn't have.
And ingenuity, technology.
And how many times do we gotta go? How many times do we gotta go get mad because we blew up somebody else's platform? You've seen it happen with Clubhouse.
Right.
You see it happen with TikTok. You see it happen with all these other platforms.
Yeah, but so we're the amplifier of other people's stuff.
And you see, it goes even deeper to that. There's a coded bias. The bias in regards of the algorithm and the code has bias. And the bias comes from those of the writers of code. So like J. Cole said, you know, one thing about the men that's controlling the pen that write history, they always seem to white out their sins. It's the same with code.
You hear that fire? Uh-oh.
It's the same with code, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same way when you log on to a social media platform and they already filter a certain type of media towards you based off of your name, demographic, and location, right? So my name is Tanisha Johnson. I'm in the South Bronx. When I log on to TikTok, I may be getting a whole bunch of toxic because their assumption in the code is that's what you like. How do we now equal the playing field, right? And I think it's important for us to realize that, or if not, we continue to be consumers.
So thank you for sharing this. Really appreciate it. This is what T-Sham is all about. It's about just being raw and candid. Urban education, we need answers. We need solutions. We need to come together as a space. So I want to thank you for showing up and talking about the state of education. That's super important. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because I'm actually sitting here, big time principal, and what many people would consider one of the toughest places on earth, first of all. Put that out there in school. I've been out to school, amazing school. What you do for babies, what you have done for babies is unmatched. So, but also, you're talking about a black ed tech guy. So just run down to the people before we get out of here who you are, what you're up to, what you're doing, and how you're going to revolutionize education.
Yeah, man. You know, I'm a kid from Compton, man, and I was lucky enough to be chosen by education to pursue revolutionizing it. I became a founding principal of a school I wished I had growing up. You know, opened up a high school, had some great results, became an Amazon best-selling author, graduated 100% of my kids 2 years in a row. Even after I left, just celebrated another 100% graduation rate this current year with the new principal. That's 3 years in a row of 100% graduation rates. We had over 90% accepted to 4 years. And I realized that, you know, we revolutionized the educational experience, but then my dream grew to revolutionizing the system. So, you know, Dr. Brown, one day I went to my pops. I say, I think this is gonna be my last year, man. He said, last year what? I said, my last year as a principal. He said, you gonna go to a different school? I said, nah, I think I'm gonna start a tech company. A tech company? When did you know tech? He said like a book face company? Talk about Facebook. And I said, nah, man, it's actually gonna be called K-12 Crypto. He said, you crippin' now? He said, man, the only money I want is what presidents own it. Right? And it was funny because what I told him, and then he wanted me to stay as a principal, but now I started K-12 Crypto, which is a learn to earn, and I'll tell more about it. He started to get more into technology and AI, and he started sending me articles around crypto, AI, Web3, education. So I said, so I guess you crippin' now, huh?
Oh.
But I say that to say is that I started this edtech company to revolutionize the educational system.
Right.
There's a $1.7 trillion student loan debt crisis that exists. Majority of that wealth is tied up in Black and brown children and adults. If you look at the average Black or brown person's student loan debt, it's over $55,000 in comparison to $20,000 to their counterparts, right? When you think about being introduced to high-paying careers, we don't get those opportunities. We don't get the opportunity to fund our future, right? So there was actually a study by Dr. Roland Fryer from Harvard who did a 36,000 kid study in 2008 called Cash for Grades. And he actually paid kids for grades. And it increased achievement, and it didn't increase test scores. But it also what was missing was that, it was just boring. Like, it was like, just giving money to kids was just like, but gamifying their learning and actually focusing not on the rewards, but focusing on their passion. Focusing on what they're good at, but also not just their passion, what they willing to do to get paid to do it. Because I always tell people all the time, 70% of people in the world don't like what they do. They do the job, right? And then many of us are just stuck with the environment jobs that we are landed with. So K-12 and our EdTech company is democratizing access to resources for K-12 teachers, K-12 educators, and K-12 students via Learn to Earn. We allow challenge-based from attendance, chronic absenteeism, to behavior, and we allow kids to earn digital rewards and they don't get access to the money until they graduate from high school. So we're doing well, man. We have one of the biggest venture capital funds who just invested in us, A16Z, and we plan to really transform education.
Well, I think you got to slow down again, because not too often, I know in my coming and going, I don't sit with a black tech founder that gets invested in. That's what you hear about Silicon Valley. You hear that about, those are stories that you hear about Silicon Valley. You read about that in the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal. So just run that back.
So we got a lot of no's. I mean, being a black founder, people don't even understand, man. Less than 2% of venture capital funds go to black founders. Like
2%?
Less than 2%.
So they giving us the peace sign.
They giving us the peace sign for real, man. Right? And typically, you when you do raise, your valuation of your company is much lower than your counterparts. But anyways, we're excited. We got through a lot of no's, but we got a yes. And sometimes all you need is that one yes. Well, like many entrepreneurs and many educators say, like, are you willing to go knock on 1,000 doors to get one yes? If you believe that one yes can change the trajectory of not only your life, but the community. And I don't know about you, Dr. Brown, I'm willing to go knock on 1,000 doors to change the world. So that's what we did. And we got the likes of A16Z Talent and Opportunity Fund that said, we believe in what you guys are building and we want to be an invested part of that. So they invested, and we're going through an accelerator with our product. And our product will be scaling in the fall for schools across the country for them to be able to sign their kids up to go through different challenges. And one of the key things that we talk about is we need culturally, and people always say, what is culturally responsive technology? It is similar to culturally responsive teaching, but to the aspect of having code deliver the product. So like, give you an example, one of our challenges on our app is called J's for Days. J's for Days, you know how you get on the sneaker app and you never get them because the bots get them? Well, we are actually developing code where kids come to school 23 days in a row, they automatically enter the raffle for a pair of sneakers. And it's automated through our software for them to be able to decide which sneakers they want. And then whatever they decide, it actually becomes a digital NFT, which is a non-fungible token, or a digital collectible for them to be remembered that they have it, right? So these are different type of things that we're building. That's super cool, man. So we're super excited.
I'm super proud of you, man. I'm sitting here with a black ed tech founder that got that seed money that you only read about. So this should be an inspiration to all of you young boys, young girls out there in urban education. We could be the athlete, that's cool. We could be the entertainer, that's great. We could be singers, we can do that. We could be doctors, lawyers, we can be anything we want. But now you see it here, you see representation. You can be a tech founder, ed tech, fintech. There's just so you can do it out there. You can do it if you believe it and you see somebody that's doing it. So we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you again for coming out. This has been Jam Talks. Teach Jam is bigger than a conference. Teach Jam is about providing solutions to our urban schools, and we're gonna do it with real candid conversations. That's why we had to pull in our guy, the revolutionary educator. We're gonna send you off. Please say the final words, give them the final call out there. Talk to the people. What do we need to do? How do we get better? How do we improve our urban schools?
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to say this. Listen, if you're an educator and you are teaching Black students, tap into Teach Jam, but more importantly, dive into your practice to elevate. Listen, automation, technology, the future is digital. Yes, there's going to be things that come along with it. Yes, you may be fearful. There's three types of people right now that's listening. There's the person that's super confused, that don't know what to do. Then there's the person that's excited, that's ready to be revolutionary. And then there's the person that's all talk, that's gonna leave here saying, I'm ready, but they don't do anything. Which one are you? Because listen, if you're fearful that AI or automation will replace you and you're saying, oh, it's never replaced me, you're right, it won't replace you. A person working with AI will replace you. So it's really important to understand that for me, these technology tools supercharge me. It doesn't discharge me. So understand that it's important and the time is now. If you don't work now, the future for Black students in our schools will no longer be under the control of us. So focus on it, work hard at it, and remember to change the world, and don't let the world change you.